issue of rights to different groups of Americans and what the Trump administration has threatened to do or actually done, and the meaning of that to Americans. So I am joined, we're going to have 3 speakers today. And so at first I would like to introduce to you, it's Livingston, right?
Yes.
Just want to double check. Mallory Livingston, who's going to join us and talk about this issue. So Mallory, I will give you the umbrella.
Oh, the official umbrella, the mayoral umbrella. This
Exactly.
is good. This is good. My name is Mallory Livingston, and I represent a group called the Transgender Alliance, which is one of the largest support and advocacy groups for transgender people in Central New York. And so I've seen up close what has happened over the last 6 months or so with regarding the trans community here in Syracuse. I can tell you that before the Affordable Care Act passed, about 75% of our members had no health care whatsoever. The small percentage who did have health care, their policies prohibited coverage for any transgender-related health care. And all of that changed under the Affordable Care Act, and now under this administration, all of that is at risk. It seems it's only a matter of time before all of that is gone. We're fortunate that on civil rights here in Central New York, we have the protection of a local ordinance signed by our mayor a couple of years ago. And we also have some protection from the leadership in Albany under Governor Cuomo. But they can't protect us from everything. Even a simple thing like getting a passport. Folks who are not transgender find it a pretty easy process to get a passport, but if you're transgender, you need to get the gender marker on your passport changed from male to female or female to male, as the case may be. Because if you're traveling overseas, depending on what country you're in, if your gender marker doesn't match your gender presentation, you could be in real serious trouble. You could be in danger. Under the Obama administration, there were rules in place that made it very easy for us to get a passport where we change our gender marker. That is no longer going to be the case. And as an attorney here in Syracuse who's in touch with the transgender community, I have been inundated with requests for name changes and other legal work to help people get new passports before the rules change. Essentially, our community is pretty much running scared, whether it's healthcare or passports. Thank you.
Thank you, Mallory. And next I'm going to introduce no stranger to any of us, Councilor Helen Husband.
Thank
Come on up,
you,
Helen.
Ms. Mayor.
I'll give you this.
Oh.
Mallory, join us on this.
Okay, I have on a thingy, so I don't really need it, but I'm going to talk a little bit about civil rights because as everyone standing here can tell, I'm an African-American woman. And part that bothers me with this administration and their policies are that not so much for me, but for my young men, they're going to put policies in place that are really going to disenfranchise young black men throughout the country, not just the city of Syracuse. So my concern is that the put in place the stop and frisk policy, I think that is going to be so damning because under the Obama administration, we worked really hard to change the dynamics of what these young black males were struggling through. And now we're looking at a time warp. It feels to me like we've gone back 50 years. I came from Mississippi. Originally, I came from Mississippi when I was 2 years old. I remember some of the different things that took place and transpired in the 60s. And for me, it's kind of scary because it feels like we've stepped back into the 60s. It feels like all of my civil rights I have to fight for again. It feels like everything that we've spent over decades trying to right the wrongs has been flipped backwards with this administration. So yes, I stand with the mayor, I stand with Mallory, I stand with everybody out here that's fighting to protect immigrant rights. Because it was first the African Americans, now they're going after the refugees. So again, they're picking their targets by the color of their skin. And that's a problem. That's a real problem. So I am just going to urge that we all band together. Because for us now, we're in a time that is unprecedented. A time we have never seen before. A time that our children know nothing about. And if we don't fight for them and for the different rights that has been afforded to not just minorities, but the rights that have been afforded to women for women's health issues, we have to fight again. So we have to stick together, folks. We have to be one community. And we have to stand up, as I like to say, for the underdog. And right now, a lot of us are underdogs.
Battling umbrellas here.
Sorry.
So we are also joined by Ann Moffett, who is going to speak to us as a parent about what it means to her and her life. Come on over, Leanne, with the big umbrella.
Good afternoon. So, up until around 8 years ago, I would never have considered myself someone that would have to represent what I considered the marginalized in society. But it was about 8 years ago that my son was diagnosed with autism. I'm not here to speak for him because I'm hoping that one day he will be able to speak for himself. But I am here to say what I've seen coming from someone who didn't have any disability in her family up until the moment her child was diagnosed at age 2. What my concerns for my son and the community of disabled individuals in this country is that we have made tremendous strides, largely due to federal mandates and federal funding through both Medicaid, Medicaid waiver services, and as well as the IDEA, which guaranteed our children the ability to go to school with others, with other children. In 1965, Robert Kennedy went to a place called Willowbrook. I ask all of you, go on, Google it, YouTube it. It looked like a great place. It looked like an institution where our children could go and be met with quality care, with people who would care for them. 1965, Robert Kennedy went and visited and said that place was a snake pit. Later on, Geraldo Rivero, maybe a name that might make you shudder, but on one of his first assignments as a reporter, walked into that same institution in the 1970s. He walked in with a doctor opening up a back door to that institution, where he walked in and saw children unclothed, unfed, being met with underfunded resources, with caregivers who did try, who wanted to be there, but were not given the adequate resources to do their jobs, and they themselves have even suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder. It took up until 1987 where that institution was closed. Something that on paper looked like it was providing services to our children, but for those very people who went there, they knew they weren't. That's my fear, is that those institutions might become alive and well, that they might look fine on paper, but the services will not be there to give our children the chance to live the life of liberty and freedom that we are all able to enjoy. So my concern is that we will put these people, as we do all marginalized people, out on the outskirts where we don't see them, where we forget about them, where they're not in the public's eye, where the families are left to feel embarrassed and not have the supports that they need to give their children all that they need. So I ask all of you to take a look if you haven't seen those videos, because it's so nice to live in this day and age where we can go and actually see what those things look like. I guarantee you that you'll be awestruck of how bad things can be. And even when a Kennedy walks in there, it took 22 years for them to close down that institution. Not all institutions have to be bad, but they need to be small and in our communities. And we have to keep a watchful eye on them. That's where we need those federal mandates. States are most likely to not have funding to provide the adequate services for these children without those federal mandates. And furthermore, we've actually gotten services that are called gold standard now for these children that make huge therapeutic differences in their lives, for both adults as well. And those standards could also be thrown to the wayside. So we're going to lower that bar. And really, people have risen to the occasion. People with disabilities are living free lives. They're working amongst us. They're in our churches. They're in our synagogues. They're everywhere amongst us. We've never had a time like that, ever. And we led the way throughout the world to make those changes. So I would hate to see any of that ever change again. It would be a very sad time to see our most vulnerable citizens, and it would be a true litmus test for where our society has become. So thank you for listening.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. I want to thank Mallory, Helen, and Leanne for coming to speak to us about the importance of advocacy and making sure that every American can live to their full potential, and that the traditionally marginalized do not go back to being marginalized. And in order for that to happen, we need all of you to join their voices and say that this is important, that all Americans be allowed to live to their full potential. So thank you all for joining us. Stay dry, and we will see you again next week. Thank you very much.